always knew something was off about my son, but I never imagined it would destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. The sun was barely rising as I made my way down the narrow hallway, the sound of my slippers whispering against the wooden floor. The old clock in the kitchen ticked steadily, its hands frozen in time, much like the life I'd come to know. My daily routine had been the same for years. Quiet mornings, coffee brewing, toast on the counter, and the familiar hum of the house that echoed with memories of a life that once felt whole. I'm Martha Williams. I'm 74 years old. The house I've lived in for over 40 years is nothing fancy, just a modest 3-bedroom nestled in Oakwood Heights. A home full of routine, full of love. Or so I thought. I had always been a simple woman. A seamstress by trade, with my hands worn by decades of work, mending clothes for my neighbors and making dresses for the women who lived down the block. I never thought much of it. Life had a way of moving on quietly, and I let it. I took comfort in the little things. A warm pot of coffee, the sunlight filtering through the kitchen window, the roses in my garden. It was a peaceful life, a predictable life, a life I cherished. But peace sometimes can be fragile. My son, Thomas, always kept to himself. He wasn't the type to play outside with the other children, never showed much interest in friends or sports. Instead, he spent his days alone, reading in his room, or playing in the garden, where he'd dig into the earth, his fingers brushing against the soil like it held secrets only he could understand. I thought it was endearing at first. A quiet, thoughtful boy. My Thomas. My son. But there were things I should have seen, things I should have questioned. Looking back, I see it now. The strange habits, the coldness in his eyes, the way he seemed to avoid connection with the world around him. Yet I was his mother, and a mother sees what she wants to see, doesn't she? I told myself he was just different, sensitive, maybe even a little misunderstood. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to know the answers. Our lives were separate, Thomas and I. His night shifts at the mall, my mornings alone in the house. Our worlds didn't overlap much. He was the man of the house after Frank passed away, and in my mind, that was enough. He kept to his own and I kept mine. That was the way it worked, until one day something changed. Something that started with a flicker in the corner of my eye, a small, subtle thing that whispered danger. And as I dug deeper, literally and figuratively, I realized that the truth was something I never could have prepared for. Something that tore apart everything I believed about my son, about my family, and about myself. I always knew something was off about Thomas, but I never could have imagined how deep the lies ran, how dark the secrets buried beneath our roof truly were. When Thomas was a boy, I remember how he'd spend hours alone in his room, staring at the walls, sometimes reading, sometimes just sitting there. I'd knock on his door, peek inside, and there he would be, his thin frame hunched over, fingers running along the edges of his books, his eyes blank, as though lost in a world that wasn't quite the same as mine. He never played outside like the other children. He didn't care for baseball or hide and seek, not even the cartoons I'd watch with him when he was younger. His world seemed smaller, quieter, I'd tell myself. He's just sensitive. He's thoughtful. He's different. Different wasn't bad, I reasoned. It wasn't until later that I realized how dangerously easy it was to believe my own excuses. He didn't want to be like the other children. That was all. He was introverted, but so was I. I understood that. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Thomas's behavior wasn't what you'd expect from a child, even one with a quiet temperament, but I told myself I was being too worried, that mothers always worried about their children. When he was 8, I found him in the backyard, holding a small bird. Its wings had been clipped, its tiny body crushed beneath his fingers. He told me he found it that way, that he was going to bury it. I believed him then. After all, children play with the world around them, don't they? I brushed it off, and he dug a small hole beneath the rose bushes where I planted the flowers. He came inside later that afternoon, his clothes covered in dirt but his eyes empty. I didn't think much of it. After all, kids can be strange sometimes. But looking back, I should have seen the signs. There was something cold about the way he handled things. The way he acted like he was in control of everything around him, even things that should have scared him. Thomas was the kind of child who never showed fear. I remember how he would bring stray animals home. Dogs, cats, birds, animals that never seemed to stay for long. They'd vanish or run away, and he'd always have an excuse ready. They got out, he'd say. Or, they ran away on their own. I thought he was just a good-hearted boy with a deep love for animals. But now I wonder, why didn't they stay? Why was he so obsessed with them? I see it now, the pattern, the strange fascination. At the time, I brushed it off. It was just one of those things. Every child goes through phases, right? As he grew older, the signs didn't disappear. They evolved, darkened. When he was 15, I found a stack of drawings in his room. They weren't like the doodles most teenagers draw, abstract shapes or cartoons. No, these drawings were unsettling. They were of people, but they weren't like anyone I knew. Faces twisted in pain, eyes wide with fear, bodies contorted in unnatural ways. There was a violence in them, a darkness I didn't want to see. I remember feeling a chill when I found them, and I asked him about them. "Just sketches, Mom, just for practice," he'd said, his voice flat, emotionless. At the time, I told myself he was just exploring. Boys will be boys, I thought. But now, I see what I was ignoring. The more he grew, the more detached he became from the world around him. He spent even more time alone, his room locked away like a fortress. When he wasn't at work, he'd vanish into the quiet corners of the house, or into the backyard where he would dig again. I thought it was a phase, something he'd grow out of. He was always so independent, so self-contained. But the older he got, the more isolated he became. By the time he was in his 20s, he'd stopped going out altogether. He never had any friends. When I asked him if he ever wanted to meet someone, a girlfriend perhaps, he'd just shake his head. "I'm fine," he'd say. His cold, distant eyes told me otherwise, but I didn't want to believe it. And then, one day when he was about 25, I caught him in the backyard again, digging near the maple tree we planted when he was 7. I'd always loved that tree. It was the one thing we had together that symbolized his childhood. But there he was, digging like he had when he was a little boy, only now the hole was deeper, and his movements were more frantic. "Thomas," I called out, stepping onto the porch, my voice trembling. "What are you doing?" He looked up at me, the moonlight casting eerie shadows across his face. "Just making room for something," he said, his voice calm, too calm. The look in his eyes made my stomach twist. He stood up, brushing dirt from his hands, but I could see that something was wrong. He wasn't the same boy who'd planted that tree with me all those years ago. "Room for what?" I asked, trying to steady my voice, but he didn't answer. He simply turned and walked back into the house, leaving me standing there, frozen in place. The smell of freshly turned earth lingered in the air, mixing with the sharp scent of something else. A smell I couldn't place, but one that gnawed at the back of my mind. It was as though the earth itself was trying to tell me something I wasn't ready to hear. Days passed, but I couldn't shake the image of him in the yard. The digging, the coldness in his eyes. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. My son, my only child, the boy I'd raised, the boy I'd nurtured, had become someone I didn't recognize. I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to see it, but I was starting to realize that the boy I thought I knew, the boy I had raised with so much love, was slipping away from me, and something far darker was emerging in his place. I woke up that morning with the usual dull ache in my back, the kind that comes from years of bending over fabric and thread, kneeling in the garden, and carrying the weight of too many things I never said aloud. The sun hadn't quite risen, and the quietness of the house, the kind that comes just before dawn, filled me with an unsettling calm. But there was something different in the air that day, something heavy, something I couldn't name. I went about my usual morning routine, the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen, the soft clink of dishes as I set the table for one. It was the first Sunday in weeks that I hadn't heard Thomas's footsteps late at night, or his strange murmurs from behind his closed door. He'd been working odd shifts again, sometimes not coming home until well after I had gone to bed, but that morning he was already up. I noticed his shoes by the door, but the house was silent. It wasn't like him to sleep in, especially on Sundays. Something about that unsettled me. My thoughts were interrupted by the soft rustle of the curtains as the wind swept through the open window. I glanced toward the backyard, my eyes narrowing as I spotted something near the maple tree. My feet carried me toward the window, drawn by the same strange pull I'd felt months ago, the same pull that had kept me awake many nights, and there, beneath the branches of the tree, was a patch of disturbed earth. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't the first time I'd noticed that part of the yard being altered. I'd seen Thomas out there before, digging, quiet, methodical, like it was some kind of ritual. But I hadn't paid it much mind. I told myself it was just his way of coping, just his peculiar hobbies that I never quite understood. But today it felt different. Today, it felt like a warning. I took a deep breath and stepped outside, the morning air cool against my skin, the scent of wet earth filling my lungs. I walked slowly toward the tree, trying to shake off the unease crawling up my spine. The ground near the maple had been dug up, a shallow hole now resting under the thick roots of the tree, as though something had been hastily buried there. I kneeled down, my fingers brushing the soil. The dampness of it was unnerving, like it had been disturbed only recently. I looked around, half expecting Thomas to appear from the house, to stop me from going any further. But there was no sound, no movement, just the soft rustling of the leaves above me and the distant hum of traffic. I was alone. I reached for the small gardening spade by the side of the shed, my hand trembling ever so slightly. I didn't know why I was doing this. I had no reason to dig, no reason to disturb the earth. But something told me I had to. Something in me was pushing me forward. The earth shifted easily beneath the tool, the soil coming away with every tug. With each scoop, the hole grew deeper, the anxiety in my chest growing heavier. And then, it happened. The spade hit something hard, something unnatural. I froze. My heart hammered in my chest as I knelt there, staring at the spot where the soil had just given way. My breath caught in my throat. I set the spade aside, the earth now trembling beneath my fingers as I dug with my hands, pulling the dirt away as quickly as I could. I don't know why I kept digging. It was as if my body was on autopilot, doing what my mind refused to acknowledge. Finally, my fingers brushed something cold and metallic. My stomach twisted. I pulled harder, my pulse thudding in my ears as I unearthed the object. A small, discarded metal box. My breath caught in my throat. It was old, rusted, but something told me this wasn't a forgotten artifact. This was something far worse. Something buried on purpose. I opened the box slowly, dread gnawing at me. And there, inside, were photographs. Not the kind you keep of happy moments or family holidays. These were different. They were grainy, faded, but the faces in them, oh God, the faces made my stomach churn. They were of people, faces twisted in terror, eyes wide with fear. Some of them were standing in everyday places, on the sidewalk, near stores, walking down streets. But there were others, Photos of men and women bound, gagged, bruised, their expressions twisted in pain. I gasped, the realization hitting me like a punch to the chest. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I sifted through the photos. One of them was a woman, young, with brown hair, wearing a necklace I recognized. It was the same one I had tucked away in my drawer for months. The one Thomas had given me for my birthday, saying it was for the best mom in the world. My heart nearly stopped. I stumbled backward, the box falling from my hands, spilling its contents across the dirt. My mind raced, my thoughts a blur. How had I not seen it? How had I ignored the signs? The odd behavior, the secrecy, the late-night walks, his cold, distant eyes. My own son, my Thomas, he was capable of this. He had been hiding it all along, right under my nose. Tears blurred my vision, but I couldn't look away. The truth was there, buried in the dirt, in the box, in the photographs. And in that moment, I felt it all unravel. The life I'd built, the family I thought I knew, everything. I was suffocating. My heart hammered against my chest. The sound of my son's footsteps on the gravel driveway snapped me back to reality. He was coming home. I quickly covered the box and buried it back in the hole, my hands trembling, my breath shallow. He couldn't know. Not yet. I stood there for a moment, staring at the dirt, as if the earth itself could give me an answer. But there were no answers, not yet. All I had were questions, and a heart torn between love and horror. The front door creaked open, and there he was, stepping onto the porch with that familiar blank expression on his face. He looked at me for a moment, just a glance, and then turned away. But I saw it. I saw the coldness in his eyes, the emptiness, and in that moment I realized I wasn't looking at my son anymore. I was looking at a stranger. I couldn't shake the images of the photographs, the woman with the necklace, the terrified faces. They kept flashing in front of my eyes as I went through the motions of my day, trying to keep everything normal, trying to pretend like everything was okay. But it wasn't. I could feel the truth creeping up behind me, just out of reach. But it was there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. Each moment I spent in the house, the walls seemed to close in on me, the memories of Thomas's strange behavior echoing in my mind. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The quiet suspicions that had built up over the years, the moments I had dismissed as quirks, they weren't quirks. They were signs. And now they all made sense. Too much sense. I tried to block out the thought of it, to pretend that I didn't see the connections. But they were there. They had always been there. It was like a puzzle, and the pieces were finally coming together. Painting a picture I never wanted to see, I remembered the first time I found him with a dead animal. It had been a summer day, warm and clear, and Thomas had just come home from the park. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a strange intensity. He was holding something in his hands, something wrapped in a cloth. At first, I thought it was just another stray dog or cat he had found. But when he unwrapped the cloth, I saw it. A rabbit. Its fur matted with blood, its eyes glazed over. I gasped, my stomach flipping. "Thomas, what happened?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It was already dead, Mom," he replied calmly, his voice flat. "I just found it like this. I thought I'd bury it." But there was something about the way he said it, something too calm, too nonchalant. I pushed the thought aside, telling myself I was just being dramatic. It wasn't his fault the animal had died. But now I see it. That calmness, that lack of emotion. That was the first sign I ignored. The first time he showed me what was to come. There were other moments too. Like the time I found him standing in the backyard late at night, staring at the sky. His posture was stiff, like a statue, and I called out to him several times before he turned. His eyes were wide, unblinking, his gaze distant. "Thomas?" I had asked, stepping closer. "What are you doing out here?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, watching the dark sky. When he finally turned to face me, his expression was almost blank. "Just thinking," he said quietly, his voice so cold it sent a shiver down my spine. "It's peaceful out here." I told myself it was just a phase. Just another one of his odd habits, his need for solitude. But now I wonder what he was really thinking, what he was really hiding in that stillness. I kept asking myself the same question. How had I not seen it? How had I missed the signs? There had always been a certain chill about Thomas. Something that wasn't quite right. But I refused to believe it. He was my son. I loved him. I convinced myself it was nothing, that every child had their quirks. But now, I felt the truth coming at me like a speeding train. The more I thought about the signs, the more they stacked up. There was the night he came home late, his clothes smeared with dirt, his hands trembling as he handed me the keys to the car. "I had to stop by work to pick something up," he had said. His excuse was so casual, so rehearsed. It didn't sit right with me. Not then, and certainly not now. He never liked to explain himself. Never shared details. He'd always kept things to himself, but I never questioned it. Now I wondered what he was hiding. And then there were the animals. So many of them. Strays that would disappear without a trace. Cats, dogs, birds. One after the other, they'd vanish from the backyard. I thought it was strange, but I assumed they simply ran away. Or worse, wandered off and got lost. But now, as I thought about it, I realized he never seemed too upset when they disappeared. In fact, he never seemed to care at all. There was one time when I confronted him about it, when I asked him why so many of the animals disappeared. He just looked at me, his expression unreadable, and said, "I don't know, Mom. Maybe they found a new home." But it wasn't just the animals that were disappearing, was it? No, it was something else, something far darker. As the weeks passed, I began to notice more disturbing details about Thomas's behavior. He started leaving the house late at night, well after midnight, without explanation. He'd come home the next morning, looking disheveled, with no real answers about where he'd been. I tried to dismiss it at first. He was working late, maybe meeting a friend, I told myself. But he never brought anyone home, never mentioned anyone by name. The silence in his room grew more profound, and I felt the distance between us stretch wider. One night, I woke up to the sound of the back door creaking open. My heart leapt into my throat. I crept out of bed, my slippers silent on the hardwood floor, and tiptoed to the window. I peeked out. My breath caught in my chest, and there he was, Thomas, standing in the yard again, just like he had so many times before. This time, though, it wasn't just a casual walk or a quiet moment of solitude. No. He was carrying something heavy, a large black bag. He was moving quickly, almost urgently, his footsteps muffled in the dark. I watched, my heart racing, as he disappeared into the shadows of the maple tree, the same place he'd been digging months ago. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether to confront him, to call the police, or to simply pretend I hadn't seen anything. But I stayed there, frozen, watching him move about the yard, the bag swinging in his hands. When he came back inside, I didn't say a word. I just went back to bed, the pounding in my chest never fading, the image of him carrying that heavy bag lingering in my mind. The next morning I told myself it was nothing. I convinced myself I had imagined it, that I had to stop letting my mind wander, but I couldn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As the days went on, the tension in the house became unbearable. I could no longer ignore the signs. The whispers in my mind grew louder, and my heart began to pound every time Thomas was near. The things I had dismissed as quirks, as harmless eccentricities, began to paint a darker picture. The quiet boy who once preferred to stay in his room had become something else entirely, something unrecognizable. I tried to ignore the truth, but deep down I knew. I knew my son was involved in something terrible, and the more I tried to bury it, the more it clawed its way to the surface. The silence between us had become unbearable. For weeks, I had been walking on eggshells around Thomas, my every move calculated, my every word measured. The truth was clawing at me from all sides, and I could no longer ignore it. The morning light filtered through the curtains as I stood in the kitchen, my hands trembling as I gripped the mug of coffee in front of me. I had to ask him. I had to confront him. The weight in my chest made it hard to breathe. I could feel the truth pressing down on me, suffocating me. It had been days since I found the buried box, the photographs. Days since I first started piecing together the horrifying reality of my son's secret life. But it wasn't enough. I needed to hear it from him. I needed him to look me in the eye and tell me what I already knew, what I had been dreading. I turned as I heard his footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate. There was a time when I could tell the difference between his steps and anyone else's. His had always been measured, almost mechanical. Today, they felt heavier, as if he was carrying a weight even he couldn't hide. He stepped into the kitchen, his face as unreadable as ever. His eyes, cold and distant, met mine, and for a split second, I saw the flicker of something I couldn't name. It was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the usual emptiness. "Good morning, Mom," he said, his voice soft, casual. I stared at him for a moment, gathering my thoughts. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I couldn't let it show. Not now. I had to stay calm. I had to stay strong. "Thomas," I began, my voice shaky despite my efforts to control it. "We need to talk." He didn't respond, just stood there, his expression neutral, waiting. I took a deep breath and spoke again, more firmly this time. "I know what you've been doing. I know what you've been hiding from me." The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of everything unsaid. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink. For a moment I thought he hadn't heard me, but then he spoke, his voice almost too calm. "What do you think I've been hiding, Mom?" His words hit me like a slap, but I held my ground. "I found the box, Thomas. The photographs, the animals, the late-night trips to the backyard. I know what you've been doing. You've been hurting people." For the first time, I saw something flash in his eyes, a flicker of something sharp, something dangerous. His lips curled into a faint smile, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You don't understand," he said, almost mockingly. "You never have." I took a step forward, my hands trembling at my sides. "Don't tell me I don't understand. You've been hiding bodies in our backyard, Thomas. You've been—" He cut me off with a sudden movement, stepping closer, his face inches from mine. The smell of him was intoxicating, but it wasn't the usual scent of soap and aftershave. No, there was something more raw, something darker. "You think I'm a monster?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. "You think I'm some kind of animal? Is that what you see when you look at me? A murderer?" I took a step back, but he was already too close, his presence suffocating. His eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time in all these years, I saw the real Thomas, the one I'd been blind to for so long. "No," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I don't want to believe it. I never wanted to believe it." He smiled then, that same cold, twisted smile. "You don't have to believe it, Mom, but it's the truth. It's always been the truth." His words were like daggers, each one piercing my heart with a force I couldn't escape. The boy I had raised, the boy I had loved, was standing in front of me, a stranger, a monster, and yet a part of me couldn't let go of him, couldn't let go of the boy he once was. "Why, Thomas?" I whispered, the tears finally spilling from my eyes. "Why did you do it?" Why did you hurt them? He stepped back, running a hand through his hair, his expression shifting, becoming almost pained. For a moment he seemed vulnerable. The boy I remembered was there again, the one I used to hold in my arms. But then it was gone, replaced by the coldness once more. Because they made me feel invisible, he said, his voice trembling with something I couldn't quite place. Everywhere I went, people looked right through me. They didn't see me. They didn't understand me. They called me names. They called me a freak, a weirdo. They made me feel small. They made me feel worthless. I felt my heart break all over again. But this time, it was different. It wasn't just the love I had for him. It was the horror of what he had become. The twisted logic, the way he justified his actions as if they were anything but monstrous. I had to make them notice me, he continued, his voice growing colder with every word. And when I did, when I finally made them see me, the look in their eyes, it was beautiful. The fear, the pain, it made me feel alive. It made me feel powerful. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight. The words stuck inside me like a lump of ice. How could my son say these things? How could he justify what he had done to innocent people? You're not a monster, Thomas, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You're my son. You're the boy I raised, the boy I loved. He tilted his head slightly, studying me, as if trying to see into my soul. That's the problem, Mom. You love the wrong things. You love the idea of who I was. But who I am now, who I've always been, has nothing to do with what you think love is. The words stung like poison. He was right, in a way. I had loved an idea. I had loved the boy I wanted him to be. But now, I was staring at a man, no, a monster, who had shattered every piece of that illusion. I did it because I had to, he said, stepping back and folding his arms. I did it because it made me feel something real. It made me feel alive, and that's something you'll never understand. I sank to the floor, my hands pressed against my face, the sobs coming harder now, uncontrollable. I had tried to protect him, tried to make excuses for him, but now I saw him for what he truly was. And I couldn't save him. You think I wanted to do this? He asked, his voice suddenly soft. You think I wanted to be like this? It's not my fault. I didn't choose this, Mom. This is who I am, and I'm never going to change. I looked up at him, my heart breaking for the boy I had lost. The son I had known was gone, replaced by someone, or something, I couldn't even begin to understand. The tears wouldn't stop. You don't have to do this, Thomas, I whispered through my sobs. You don't have to be this way. Please, you need help. He stepped closer, his cold eyes never leaving mine. I don't need help. I need you to understand. This is who I am, and if you can't accept that, then maybe you should let me go. The weight of his words hung in the air, suffocating me. I had spent my whole life trying to protect him, trying to shield him from the world. But in the end, it wasn't the world that had hurt him. It was him. I couldn't save him. I couldn't save my son. I don't remember how long I sat there after Thomas left. The room was silent, the walls closing in on me as I tried to make sense of everything he had said, everything he had done. I felt like the world was spinning around me, and I was standing still, trapped in some terrible nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I had always thought a mother's love was enough to heal anything, that no matter how dark the world became, love could find a way to fix it. But I was wrong. I had been wrong for so long. The truth about my son, the one I had held in my arms as a baby, the boy I had watched grow up, was staring me in the face now. And no amount of love could change the man he had become. The darkness inside him had been there all along, buried under layers of excuses and denial. But now I couldn't hide from it anymore. I couldn't pretend. I spent the next few days in a haze, moving through the motions of daily life without truly living it. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, his cold, empty eyes, the twisted smile as he justified his actions. I had always thought I knew him, but now I saw a stranger in his place. I could hear the sirens in the distance, growing louder each day, as if they were drawing closer, inching their way toward me, toward the truth I had tried to avoid. The police had started showing up more often, neighbors whispering about it, their worried glances making it clear that they knew something was happening. They knew something was wrong, and I knew they were right. It wasn't long before they came knocking on my door. The first officer who arrived was tall and stern-looking, his uniform crisp and professional. He introduced himself as Officer Blake, but I couldn't focus on his name. All I could focus on was the weight of what was coming. The floodgates had opened, and there was no way to close them now. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mrs. Williams," Officer Blake said gently, as if trying to soften the blow of what was about to come. "We need to ask you some questions about your son, Thomas." I swallowed hard, nodding. "What about him?" "There have been several reports, ma'am. Missing persons, strange occurrences. We're investigating the possibility that your son may be connected to some of these cases." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. The breath left my chest, and I felt the room spin around me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. "You think my son," I began, but my voice cracked and I had to stop. How could I say it? How could I admit it? "Mrs. Williams," he continued, his tone softening, "we've found evidence that links Thomas to several disturbing events. We need to investigate your property, the backyard, the area around the maple tree. We have a warrant." A cold chill ran down my spine. I felt my legs tremble beneath me. The maple tree, the place where it all started, the place I had once thought was sacred. Now it was the site of unspeakable horrors. I don't know what you'll find," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Please, Mrs. Williams," Officer Blake urged. "We need your cooperation. This is the only way we can get to the bottom of it." I nodded, unable to speak. There was nothing more to say. The truth was already out there, buried beneath the soil in the very yard I had spent so many years tending to. And now, it was all coming to light. I followed Officer Blake outside, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt as though I were walking in a dream, my feet moving on their own, my body numb to everything around me. The yard that had once been a place of peace, where I had planted flowers and tended to my roses, was now a crime scene. The familiar scent of the earth that I had loved so much now felt foreign, almost suffocating. As Officer Blake and the other officers began to dig, I stood by, unable to look away. My hands trembled at my sides, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts, none of them making sense. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And then, they found it. The officers dug through the soil near the maple tree, their movements deliberate and precise. The sounds of shovels hitting the ground echoed in my ears, each thud sending waves of dread through my body. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But I stayed there, frozen, unable to move. One of the officers called out to Blake, his voice tight with emotion. "We've got something." I saw the flash of metal as they unearthed the first object, a small rusted tin box. My heart stopped. "More," Blake said, his voice almost a whisper. "We've found more." As they dug deeper, they uncovered more boxes, more evidence, clothes, jewelry, items that didn't belong to us, to anyone we knew. And then, the worst of it all, the unmistakable scent of decay. I turned away, my hand covering my mouth as I tried to stop the sobs that threatened to escape. This was my son. This was the boy I had loved, the boy I had raised, and now he had become something I could barely comprehend. The officers worked quickly, the urgency in their movements growing as they unearthed remains, bones, photographs, and items that were unmistakably personal. One of the officers held up a piece of clothing, torn and stained. "We've got a match on this," he said, his voice grim. "This belongs to one of the missing women." I closed my eyes, the world spinning around me. I couldn't look at it anymore. I didn't want to see it, but I couldn't look away. I had known. I had always known. But I had never wanted to believe it. The police continued to investigate, uncovering more evidence of Thomas's crimes. It was clear now. There was no way to deny it. My son was a monster, and I had been blind to it for so long. As the officers packed up their evidence, I stood there in shock, unable to speak. The weight of it all was too much to bear. I had failed him. I had failed everyone. When they finally left, taking Thomas's belongings with them, I was left alone in the house. The silence was deafening, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. The man I had loved, the boy I had raised, was a murderer, and nothing would ever be the same again. The police arrested Thomas later that evening. They took him from the house in handcuffs, his expression as empty as ever. He didn't speak to me. He didn't look at me. He just walked out the door like it was another day, another moment, and in a way it was. It was the moment I had feared for so long. The moment when everything I knew about my son, about my life, came crashing down. I watched him leave, my heart breaking, knowing that I would never see him the same way again. He was my son, but now he was a criminal. He was a killer. And I was left alone, picking up the pieces of a shattered life, wondering how it had all gone so wrong. It's strange, isn't it? How love can twist into something unrecognizable. How the people we think we know, the people we hold most dear, can turn into strangers right before our eyes. And yet, no matter what, you still love them. Thomas is my son. He always will be. Even after everything. Even after the truth came crashing down around us. Even after the pain, the guilt, the horror. I still love him. A mother's love doesn't just disappear. It's not that simple. But what I've come to understand, with time, is that love alone isn't enough. It doesn't heal all wounds. It doesn't erase the darkness in the people we cherish. I keep thinking about the boy he used to be. The one I held in my arms. The one who looked up at me with those bright eyes full of wonder. He was kind once. I saw it. I believed in it. But somewhere along the way he changed. And somewhere along the way I missed it. I let myself believe that love could fix it. That my love for him could turn him into the person I wanted him to be. I never wanted to believe that Thomas was capable of such things. I never wanted to see him as anything but my son. But now I know the truth. The boy I thought I knew was gone, replaced by something I can't quite understand. And that's the hardest part. It's not the crimes, the violence, the horror. It's the loss of the son I thought I had. It's the realization that I will never be able to look at him the same way again. I feel like I've been living in two worlds. The one where I still try to protect him, still hope that he'll turn back into the boy I raised. And the one where I have to face the fact that he's not that boy anymore. He's something else. Something dark. I loved him. I still do. But love doesn't change the truth. Love doesn't stop the consequences. And in the end, no matter how much I wish I could, I can't save him from himself. What I've learned, through all the pain, is that we can't always protect our children. Sometimes they make choices that we can't control. Sometimes they become people we never imagined. And sometimes as a mother you have to let go, no matter how much it hurts. But what I've also learned is that I'm not alone in this. I know that others have faced their own unimaginable truths, their own moments of betrayal and heartache. And maybe, just maybe, sharing those stories will help us all heal. If you've ever faced the unimaginable, leave a comment below. Share your story because you're not alone.